Okay, good morning, everybody, and welcome back to my channel. I was rewatching the video that posted early this morning on needles, and there were a few things that I left out um, that unfortunately should have been in the video, and it might be a little bit confusing for you. The other thing I left out is what a set of needles should cost you versus a full set. What does a full set of needles cost? And what are the difference between the set of needles that I have? Also, um, what are the other needles out there? Now, in the video, I showed you these are my 4-inch Haya Haya, and this comes in a set. It's a small set, so I have US size 2 through a US size 8 in the 4-inch. And that's what they call a partial set. Now, the Haya Hayas, you can tell, have blue cables. My Shigu needles have the cables are red. So you'll be able to know the difference of which I'm working with if I'm doing a knitting project. If you see a red cable, I'm using the Shigu. If you see the blue cable, I am using the Haya Haya. Now, what are the difference between the Haya Haya and the Shigu? Well, first off, I'm going to bring this in. You can kind of see with the Shigu, these are just plastic cables, meaning they're very, very flexible. They move. You can do everything with these, but these are just a plastic circular. And over time, these will have a twist to them. My Shigu needles, which are the red cabled, they actually have a piece of steel that goes through the cable. They're a little bit heavier than the Haya Haya. They're also more expensive than the Haya Haya. And again, the reason that the Shigu is more expensive than the Haya Haya is because their cables are steel cables. Why is this important? Well, the steel cables will not bend out of shape like the Haya Hayas will. And they're a little bit more user friendly, at least to me. The other difference between my Haya Haya and my Shigu are the tips. These are very sharp, what they call sharp tips, meaning the points are incredibly sharp. My Shigu set has a little bit of a taper. Now, they're still pretty sharp for a knitting needle, but they're not as sharp as the Haya Haya. And there are other companies such as Addi, Leica needles that are not as pointy as the Haya Haya and the Shigu. Now, what should you expect to spend for needles? Well, as I mentioned in the video that I did last night, if you're new to knitting, go get a Clover US size 8 or a US size 7 bamboo needle. You'll probably spend about $11, $12, $13 for the set of needles. That is a good beginner price point for the needles. They're bamboo. You can get those on Amazon. You can get those at Walmart. You can get those at Joann's. You can get those at Michael's, Hobby Lobby. You can also get those in your local yarn shop. Usually they'll carry the Clover needles. You can also go on to Clover's website and probably order them through there. Now, why is this important when you might be asking yourself, well, Joel, you said not to get knitting needles on Amazon or at the big box stores. I'm going to reiterate why I said that and what I meant by that. I'm talking about if you are going to purchase a full set of needles and you're new to full sets of needles and have never worked with the full set of needles before. Now, I'm going to back up for a second and say, if you've been knitting a while and you're a beginning knitter, but you're more into the advanced beginning side than a brand new knitter. So if you've been knitting a while, going to a yarn store and actually looking at each different set and brand of needle is better than going to a big box store or trying to order them off of Amazon. And the reason I don't order my needles off of Amazon is you don't know if you're getting the real brand or if you're getting a knockoff of the brand. And yes, just like we're going to take a step back. A lot of times if people are wanting like a Louis Vuitton handbag, but they don't want to spend Louis Vuitton prices, and Louis Vuitton handbags start at the $2,000 mark and they go up into the $4,000, $5,000, $6,000 category, you can get knockoffs of those bags. Well, the same is true for your needles. You might be thinking you're buying the actual name brand, but what you're actually doing is you're ending up buying a knockoff pair. And this matters because some of these needles are very expensive, especially when it comes to the full sets. And I'll get into what my price for the full sets are. Now, these 4-inch Hayahayas that I have US size 2 through US size 8. And I think I want to say there are 7 sets, meaning 7 pairs of needles in that set. They range at about $100 for the small set. And the small set, talking US 2 through 8, again, are the more common sizes that most people would use for projects. Now, the larger set, which starts at a US 9 and goes through a 15, and again, you're getting, I think, 7 needle sets or 7 pairs of needles. That's about $80 in the Hayahaya line. Now, my Xiegu full set, which I have, which goes from a US 2 all the way to a US 15, and I think that gives me, I think I get 14 sets or 14 pairs of needles in that set. I spent about $180 for that set. So that's where the price for the sets come into play. And some sets are less, some sets are more. Xiegu does make a bigger set that has more bells and whistles that retails for over $300. Do you need to spend that much money on a set of needles? No, you don't, but again, it's personal preference, and knitting needles are very intimate to the user, meaning because you're the one that has to use these, they're very intimate. Same with a crochet hook. What works for me may not be the right needle for you, and what you use may not be the right needle for me. So it's all personal preference, which is why if you're getting into crafts and you're going to be a crafter and you're like, I want a good needle, whether it be knitting or crocheting, go to a local yarn store and just look at what they have and try them out. If you're able to try out a needle or get other opinions on why they like them, and a lot of times knitting clubs will allow you to feel their needles, you may find the right needle for yourself. Now, what does a pair of needles usually run? Well, if they're bamboo, you're going to expect to pay probably $10, $11, $12. Clover are good starter needles because you're not spending an arm and a leg. Now, interchangeable needles such as this will run you probably about $18, $19 per pair. If you get the Addy needles, you'll be spending probably $25 to $30 for a pair of needles. Same with Leica needles. Now, each brand is different. Hiya does make metal tip needles, and these are what they call metal tip needles. And the difference between these and a bamboo needle is these are very slick to work with, meaning that they're very fast for me, and they're usually fast for the knitter that is using it. But if you're a beginning knitter, meaning you've only knitted for a very, very short time, or you're just starting to knit, I don't suggest trying to start with the metal needle. A lot of times what'll happen is you will get frustrated because your yarn will fly off those needles, and not in a good way. As you get better with your knitting, then move up from a bamboo needle to a metal needle. Or I have friends that are advanced knitters that move from a bamboo needle to a much better wooden needle. And some, again, this is where personal preference comes into play. Some people love the wooden needles, and they can be just as fast as the metal needles. But again, it's user preference. Now, what are the different companies of needles? Well, Clover is probably your beginning needle sets. And Clover makes a variety of needles. They're not the greatest needles, but they are great for beginning knitters. And the reason is they grip the yarn. You don't fight with them as much as you would with a metal tip. As you get better and more confident in your knitting, then you can slowly move up, get your first set of circular metal needles, and work your way up to a full set. You also want to think of what you're going to be knitting. Meaning, are you going to be doing baby stuff? Are you going to make clothing? Are you going to do blankets? Are you just going to stay with small projects like dishcloths or tea towels, scarves, hats? You need to think of what you're going to make in the long run. And we'll discuss that as we go in, because each needle is going to be different. Now, one needle I did not discuss in yesterday's video was the double-pointed needle. I will do that later, and I do not suggest a beginner to start with double-pointed needles, because a double-pointed needle means that there are points on both ends of the needle, hence why they're double-pointed. And double-pointed needles are used for very, very small areas, such as when the sleeves start to taper to a very, very small size like this, you're going to want to switch to either a very, very small circular needle, or you're going to ultimately need to go into a double-pointed needle. And double-pointed needles come in a set of 5. So 4 needles will have stitches, will have an equal amount of stitches on each needle, and the 5th one is your working needle. So you're always rotating the needles in the round. And we'll get into that again later. Those can be a little bit more expensive. My sets of double-pointed needles are usually $15, and they make different double-pointed needles. They make square tip versus the round needle, and I'll show you those later. I'm not going to get you guys confused with that. If you're a beginner knitter, don't get double-pointed needles right now. Just get the straight laced or straight needle, US 8, US 7. That'll be your beginning needle without having to spend a whole great deal of money. Now, what brands are out there? Well, you have Hiya, Shigu, Leica, Addy, Knit Pro, or nitpick. They used to actually, and I'm going to show you, these are the crochet hooks. But Knit Pro actually does do knitting needles, and they're very reasonable. I was looking at the sets online. They range in the $120 to $150 category for a full set. Now, Knit Pro does do both a bamboo as well as a metal. Now, do I suggest you running out and getting the full set of bamboo? No, nor do I suggest you run out and get the metal version. What I would do is go to a yarn store and actually look at the full set and decide what's right for you if you're going into a full set. The reason I don't like the Knit Pro is, to me, they're more of a cheaper needle. They don't feel good when I'm using them, and I had a full set of their wooden needles, and it was an old set, meaning I probably bought it 10, 15 years ago, and I hated it. They were not a smooth needle for me. I fought them, and I just didn't like the needle. Now, could I say the same thing today? Probably. I probably would be hesitant for me, personally, to go get a Knit Pro when I love my Shy Goo needles. Now, my Shy Goo needles, I went out and tried them out, loved them, fell in love with them. They're really good for me. And at some point, I'll probably get a smaller set or a 4-inch needle, and I'll have 2 full sets of my Shy Goo to use for projects. So I hope this helped more. Gave you more information. If you have any questions, leave them down below. I'll be more than happy to help you. As we get into the new year and we start working on things, we're going to talk stuff like yarn. Which yarns should you use? Which needles should you use? That kind of stuff. And we'll get into that probably mid-November. Mid-January. Sorry, I have November on my brain. We'll get into that stuff, and we will start to pick out yarns for the first project. So, knit and crochet on. I will see you guys next week. We'll discuss some more stuff. We may get into yarns next week. So, let's get into the crafting world next year. Everybody have a very safe and Merry Christmas. Happy holiday season. And I will see you on the next Crafting with Joel video.